Good morning and welcome to the Southwest Drought Briefing. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the NIDIS and Southwest Climate Hub web pages. My name is Emily Elias and I'm the director of the USDA Southwest Climate Hub. This webinar is a collaborative effort. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the collaborators in producing this webinar. They are Adam Lang and Joel Lisenby with the National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS. Joel is the Regional Drought Information Coordinator for their Intermountain West with NIDIS. I would also like to thank the Western Regional Climate Center and Desert Research Institute in Reno, Nevada, and the Drought Learning Network, which aspires to link climate service providers. We begin this webinar by acknowledging that the land each of us is joining from today is the ancestral land of Indigenous cultures. As we are all in different parts of the country, this will be different for all of us. The land where I'm speaking from is the ancestral lands and territories of the Ute, Apache, the Pueblos, Hopi, Zuni, and the Dene Nation. I believe it's important to provide this acknowledgement because the narratives of perspective without full acknowledgement of the people who lived on this land before us. This is also important because many of us are land managers or work to support land managers, and we strive to manage the land well for future generations and for the good of all. Thanks for your attention and respect in acknowledging this important history. The format for today's webinar will be a presentation on drought conditions and outlook, followed by time for questions led by Joel. Then we'll hear about CCAST, or the Collaborative Conservation and Adaptation Strategy Toolbox, followed by more time for questions. I would like to invite you to please use the question box to record your questions at any time during this webinar. Our first speaker is Dr. David Simeral, and he will provide our drought conditions and outlook report. David is an associate research scientist in climatology at the Desert Research Institute and Western Regional Climate Center in Reno, Nevada. And he is one of the few scientists across our nation producing the drought monitor maps. David?
Good morning. Thank you, Emily, for the introduction. And I'm gonna see if you can hand over. Okay, there we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, I'm gonna get started here. I have quite a bit of territory to cover in a short period of time. So first, I'm gonna take a look at the last 30 days of precipitation and look at the temperature. As you can see on the left, that's our percent of normal precipitation looking at the last 30 days. And you can see a lot of the warmer kind of red and brownish colors on the map. And those represent below normal precipitation. The cooler colors, you can see we've had some areas of above precipitation over the past month with some of these recent storms we've had in the past week in southeastern or southwestern portions of Arizona, northern Arizona, southeastern New Mexico, south central Colorado, etc. But overall, been below normal for the month, for the last 30 days. Looking at temperature departures, you can see much of the region in these kind of yellow colors. That's near normal temperature departures. And then these cooler colors, you can see we have some areas where we've had below normal temperatures, just a couple degrees, but we've had some larger anomalies kind of in the 4 to 6 degree range up in the northeast corner of Arizona, as well as portions of eastern Utah and northern Colorado. Looking at providing some context, looking at the water year precipitation. So this is starting at on October 1st. And for those of you who don't know, in the Western US, this is how we measure our precipitation, annual precipitation, rather than starting on the calendar year. We start when the cool season begins and most of the precipitation starts falling. So this is looking at October 1st to present. On the left-hand side, this is our looking at that period. And as you can see, we're well below normal across most of the region. We've got a few pockets up in the Sangre de Cristo range in northern New Mexico and extending into south central Colorado, as well as some areas in the San Juan Mountains and mountains of central Colorado as well that have above normal precipitation for the period. But elsewhere, especially southern Nevada, much of Arizona, southern New Mexico, were well below normal. This is pretty typical for a La Nina pattern, where this part of the country generally receives less precipitation during those types of La Nina events. Looking on the right, this is temperature departures, and you can see for the period, a lot of mix of near normal to above normal temperature with some below normal temperatures. You can see here in Utah, northwestern Colorado, up in the Four Corners area. Looking at the statewide precipitation and temperature ranks, this is October through December. You can see it stands out for this period. It was the 8th driest for the October through December period in both Utah and in Arizona. As far as temperature, it was the 6th warmest on record for that period for Arizona, as well as the 10th warmest in New Mexico. And you can see next to it, this is the ranking and the temperature anomaly. And this is obviously averaged across the state. Just to provide some more context as to how dry it is, these are the temperature or precipitation deficits for the last 12 months. And this is just to kind of give you an idea as far as context of how dry it really has been. You can see the red areas have the largest departures, and those are pretty significant. That's 12 to 16 inch range, and you can see some in the San Juan Mountains, as well as some areas along the Mogollon Rim in Arizona and below the rim as well. But these are pretty significant departures that we need to make up. This is the current drought monitor map, which just released on Thursday. And looking at the western US, you could see a lot of red and brown, except for areas up in the northwestern part of the region. In the southwest, we've got about 98% of the region that's currently in drought. The only areas that aren't are in these areas down in the southwestern part of California. Looking at statewide percentages within these categories. So just if you don't know, D1 through D4 are drought categories, and the least severe would be D1, D4 would be the most severe, and this is what they equate to in terms of rankings. If you look at the D4 drought, that's a drought event that occurs once every 50 to 100 years, as opposed to a D1, which occurs once in every 5 to 10 years. So you can see we got a lot of D4 across the Four Corners states, as well as in southern and eastern Nevada. And areas that are in D4 to D3, got some pretty high percentages, especially within Arizona and Utah. And that corresponds with the record low precipitation that we saw in a number of areas like Tucson experienced, Phoenix, Las Vegas, so forth. As far as impacts, we're seeing impacts in the agricultural community to ecosystems, water resources, snow drought, elevated fire danger. Some of the agricultural impacts have gone dormant for this time of year because the grasses are dormant, so we're seeing less in those areas at the moment. This is looking at the latest drought impacts this is the Seymour Drought Impact Reporting System from the National Drought Mitigation Center on the left. And this is the some of the reports that we're getting in, like water hauling in northern Arizona for cattle ranchers on BLM land. This is like 4 of the last 5 years they've had to do water hauling because wells are going dry, stress vegetation in area, cactus are getting desiccated and so forth. Also in the eastern plains of Colorado, we're seeing from a longer term of dry soils and erosion. A lot of, during wind events, we're seeing a lot of really poor air quality in those areas, as well as in the eastern portions of New Mexico. Looking at the basin level snowpack conditions, you can see pretty much the whole region is well below normal, especially in the basins in Arizona, Little Colorado, Verde, Salt, Upper Gila, Rio Grande. We've got a couple that are near normal in the Upper Arkansas and the Rio Grande headwaters, which is promising. And with storm systems coming in, we just had a little one in the region, a couple that moved through last week, and we're expecting another set to come in, a series of them starting today, and several stronger storms coming in early next week. And these are individual SNOTEL monitoring stations throughout those areas. And you can see the snow water equivalent percent median for the date are way below normal. These are like below the 25% range. And you can see those other areas in the Sangre de Cristo area and in the San Juan Mountains and part of the San Juan Mountains. That's the Upper Rio Grande headwaters. We've got some that are above normal in those areas, but elsewhere below normal. This is looking at the last 72 hours. This is snowfall that fell during those last storms. We had up in the San Francisco peaks, they got some decent snow up there in northern Arizona, about anywhere 2 to 6 inches. In the San Juans, had a little heavier snowfall in that area, as well as in the Sangre de Cristo and southern end of the Front Range in Colorado. Looking at reservoir storage, this is as of January 1st, and these are averaged over the state. We have a couple states that are above average. Fortunately, Arizona had some good carryover in the Salt River system, so they are still above normal. And this black line represents the average for this time of year. So we're a little above average there. Utah is doing well as well. Below normal conditions, reservoir conditions in Colorado, Nevada, and especially in New Mexico. And then here are a couple, I select reservoirs and the percentage full they are. A couple that stand out are Elephant Butte, which has been really low for a number of years on the Rio Grande system, is 7% full. And also some of the latest stream flow forecasts models are predicting inflow into Lake Powell to be about 53% of normal. So that's below normal. Looking at the current forecast, looking ahead next 7 days. On the left, this is the quantitative precipitation forecast that's put out by NOAA, Weather Prediction Center, and CPC. And these are in inches. So you can see we've got, with this number of storms that are coming in, we're going to have some pretty good liquid accumulations. We're looking at 1 to 3 inches plus in areas along the Mogollon Rim in Arizona, up on the Colorado Plateau, San Juan Mountains, mountains in southwestern Utah. They're kind of on the border of the Great Basin and transition into the Colorado Plateau, as well as some of the basin and range in Nevada, as well as we're looking to get some spillover from the Sierras as well into the mountains, the ranges in far western Nevada as well. On the right, this is the last GFS snowfall prediction for the next week. And you can kind of take some of this with a grain of salt, but you can see some pretty significant accumulations along the Mogollon Rim as well as in the Mogollon Mountains, Sacramento Mountains down in southern New Mexico, Sangre de Cristos, also in the San Juans of southwestern Colorado, as well as up on the Wasatch Front and the Uinta Mountains as well. And also looking down in southern Nevada, kind of the Mount Charleston area, as well as some of the Basin and Range, Shoshone Range, and ranges in the western part of the state. So this is promising. We should see those numbers, the SWE numbers, bump up a bit after the next week. Looking at the current forecast, 6 to 10 days, obviously, as I've discussed, we're going to be getting more storms. So you're going to see below normal temperatures, obviously associated with this systems that are moving in and cloud cover, and above normal precipitation. Unfortunately, we're not going to see it in eastern portions of Colorado and New Mexico. Looking at the 1 month outlooks, we're looking at back to this more typical La Nina pattern where we've got above normal precipitation in the kind of northern tier in the northwestern Pacific Northwest. And this transition area, we're looking at equal chance probabilities, but below normal precip across much of this southwest region. Looking at the drought outlook going into from January 21st through April 30th. Again, we're looking at persistence here of drought throughout the Four Corners states, as well as California and Nevada. So I don't really see, unless something changes, which is possible, we're looking at kind of persistence of these drought conditions. And that's the last slide here is our current Enso status. And as I mentioned, we are currently in La Nina. We're having a moderate La Nina that's occurring, and you can see this. These are sea surface temperature anomalies across the Pacific, and they're extending into the west central Pacific. We're seeing some changes. We're getting some above normal sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific that are developing. And this is the latest model predictions, and currently we are right here. And these are all the different dynamical models and statistical models that predict these sea surface temperature anomalies. And this is the average in the green of the statistical models, the dynamical models, averages in the red. And you can see by the time we get into late springtime, we're going to be transitioning, it's looking like, into neutral conditions again. And that cutoff for La Nina is this minus 5.5 C right here. So you can see we're looking to go back into those neutral conditions. And that is all on my end. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. We have time for just one question. Hannah asks, is there any historical data for soil moisture that we can compare the precipitation with the precipitation deficit?
Yeah, there is some, you can look at some of the NLDAS soil moisture percentiles, and that can kind of give you an idea as to where we are at a given period in terms of where the soil moisture is at. The last soil moisture data that I've been looking at, this time of year with the cooler temperatures and some precipitation, we're seeing, we're getting a little bit of a boost in soil moisture this time of year. So hopefully that trend will continue.
Great. I know I said we only had time for one question, but there was another question that came in that I think is important for us to address. Bruce asks, do neutral Enso conditions indicate normal or average conditions?
Well, they just indicate that there's going to be near normal sea surface temperatures, but that has differing implications for differing regions around the West in terms of precipitation patterns. And there's also differentiation. There's varying degrees, just as there is with La Nina and El Nino, in terms of strong, moderate, and weak. There are certain patterns that are associated with each, but as we've seen in the past 10 years, even in some La Nina years when it's been expected to be below normal precip in certain regions further to the south, we've had near normal and above normal precipitation in given years. And we've also had strong El Ninos in the past 5-6 years. One in particular that it was expected to be very wet in the southwest, and it didn't come to fruition. So I could follow up more on that. If he had some specific geographic regions he was interested in, I could give him some more detailed information on that.
Okay, I'll let you do that. Thank you for your expertise, Dave. I'm going to pass back to Emily